My name is Elena Vasquez, though I stopped using my married name the day I packed 3 suitcases and a car seat into a Hertz rental and drove 900 miles with my 2-year-old daughter sleeping in the back. I was 26 the Thanksgiving. My mother looked at me across her dining room table and said, "You can't stay here. He's coming for dinner." She meant her new husband's son. A man my age who had never held a job longer than 6 months, who had called me a drama queen at my own father's funeral, who had once backed my mother into a corner in her own kitchen and somehow convinced her she'd imagined it. My mother had married Frank 2 years after my dad died. I was 23, newly divorced, raising a toddler alone, working 2 jobs. I didn't have time to be suspicious. That was my first mistake. Frank had 3 adult children from his first marriage. None of them worked, none of them contributed. But they showed up to every holiday with empty hands and full appetites, and my mother cooked for them like she was auditioning for a part in their family. Meanwhile, I was the one driving her to chemo appointments when Frank couldn't get off work. I was the one who caught her mortgage payment when Frank's side business hit a rough patch. I was the one who sat with her in the emergency room at 3 a.m. when her blood pressure spiked, while his phone went straight to voicemail. None of that mattered on Thanksgiving. What mattered was that his son didn't want me at the table. And my mother, the woman who taught me to tie my shoes, who held my hand at my father's grave, who swore after the divorce that she'd always have a place for me and my daughter. That woman asked me to leave. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I lifted my daughter out of the high chair, put her coat on, and walked out the front door without saying goodbye. My mother followed me to the porch, wringing her hands, saying she'd make it up to me, saying Frank just needed time to adjust, saying his kids had been through so much. I turned around and said, "What have my daughter and I been through, Mom? Can you name one thing?" She couldn't, or she wouldn't. Either way, I got in the car and drove to a Motel 6 with $63 in my wallet and a 2-year-old who didn't understand why we weren't having turkey. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where we sit with the quiet betrayals that happen inside ordinary families. Stay with me, because the part you came for happens late, and it's worth the wait. That winter was the coldest of my life. Not the weather, the silence. My mother didn't call for 3 weeks. When she finally did, it was from Frank's phone, and she spoke in a whisper like she was afraid of being overheard. She asked if I'd found a place to live. I told her I was staying with a coworker, sleeping on an air mattress in a basement. She said that was good. She said Frank's son had moved back in to get on his feet, and there wasn't room. There wasn't room for me and a toddler in the house where I'd grown up, in the bedroom that still had my high school yearbooks on the shelf. I didn't say the things I wanted to say. I just said okay and hung up. Then I sat on that air mattress in the dark and let myself feel the shape of what I'd just learned. My mother had made her choice. She'd chosen a man who didn't love her and his children, who didn't respect her over the daughter who had carried her through cancer. And she would keep choosing them until something forced her to stop. I decided that something wasn't going to be me begging. I got a second job, night shift at a group home for disabled adults. I'd put my daughter to bed at my coworker's place, a saint named Deb who charged me nothing and asked no questions. Then I'd drive across town and work from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., helping residents use the bathroom, making sure they took their meds, sitting with a man named Arthur who had late-stage Parkinson's and couldn't be left alone. I'd get back to Deb's at 6:30, sleep until 8 when my daughter woke up, then take her to daycare and go to my first job at a dental office. I did that for 7 months. The whole time, my mother posted pictures on Facebook. Thanksgiving with Frank's family, Christmas morning with his grandchildren opening presents under the tree she'd put up in the living room where I'd learned to walk. New Year's Eve, her and Frank at a party, her in a dress I'd never seen, him with his arm around her waist. She looked happy. That was the part that broke something in me. Not that she chose him, that she looked happy doing it. I stopped checking Facebook in February. That was the month I found the apartment. A one-bedroom above a garage, owned by an elderly couple who rented it cheap to single mothers. $400 a month, utilities included. The bedroom was big enough for a twin bed and a crib. The kitchen had a 2-burner stove and a fridge that froze everything in the back. I painted the walls yellow because yellow was the cheapest paint at the hardware store, and because my daughter liked buttercups. I didn't tell my mother I'd moved. I didn't tell her anything. I'd learned that information was just something she'd passed to Frank, who'd pass to his son, who'd use it to mock me at their next dinner. So I went quiet. Not angry quiet. Self-protection quiet. The call that changed everything came in July. My mother's neighbor, a woman named Patty who had known me since I was born, called my cell at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. She said my mother was in the hospital. A fall down the basement stairs, broken hip, possible concussion. Frank had driven her to the ER and then left to pick up his son from work. He'd been gone 4 hours. My mother had been alone in a hospital room, unable to reach her phone, unable to call a nurse, lying in the dark with a broken hip and no one to hold her hand. Patty had found out from a cousin who worked at the hospital. She asked if I was coming. I sat on my yellow couch and looked at my daughter's crayon drawings taped to the wall. The Little Mermaid, a butterfly with 6 legs, a picture of me and her holding hands under a rainbow. I thought about the hospital room. I thought about the cold. I thought about how my mother had left me in the cold on Thanksgiving. Then I thought about something else. Something Mrs. Kovach told Daniel in the story before this one. Money comes back. Time doesn't. My mother didn't owe me money. She owed me time. And she'd wasted it on people who didn't deserve it. But that didn't mean I had to waste mine being the person who stayed away. I drove to the hospital. 45 minutes. My daughter was already asleep, so Deb sat with her. I walked into room 312 at 1 a.m., and my mother was alone, just like Patty said. Her eyes were closed. Her face was pale. Her left leg was elevated in a contraption that looked like a medieval torture device. There was a tray of untouched food next to the bed. Jell-O, broth, a Sprite that had gone flat. I pulled up a chair and sat down. I didn't say anything. After a minute, her eyes opened. She looked at me like she was seeing a ghost. Then she started to cry. Not the loud kind, the kind that comes from somewhere deep, the kind that has been waiting a long time. She said, "I didn't think you'd come." I said, "I almost didn't." She asked if she could hold my hand. I let her. Her fingers were cold and thin. I remembered those hands teaching me to braid hair, to tie fishing knots, to sign my name in cursive. I remembered those hands waving goodbye at my wedding. I remembered those hands ringing on the porch on Thanksgiving. I didn't forgive her that night. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a door you walk through slowly, and you don't have to stay on the other side. But I sat with her until the sun came up, and when the nurse came in at 6 a.m. to check her vitals, my mother introduced me. "This is my daughter," she said, "my oldest. She's always been the strong one." There it was, the same word Sam heard, the same word Daniel heard. Strong, the word families use when they mean the one we didn't have to take care of. I didn't correct her. I just said, "I'll be back tonight after work." And I was. Every night for 2 weeks, I drove from my second job at the group home to the hospital, sat with my mother until visiting hours ended, then drove home and slept 3 hours before my daughter woke up. Frank came twice, both times for less than 20 minutes. His kids didn't come at all. When my mother was discharged, she didn't go home to Frank. She went to a rehab facility. Then she called me and asked if she could stay with me for a few days while she figured things out. A few days. I said yes. That was 3 years ago. My mother lives with me now. She has her own room. The bedroom, actually. My daughter and I share the loft upstairs. My mother cooks dinner every night. She walks my daughter to kindergarten. She tells me she's sorry at least once a week. And every time she says it, I believe her a little more. Frank is gone. She left him 6 months after the fall. She's in therapy now, something she would have laughed at before. She's learning why she chose him. She's learning why she chose his kids over hers. It's hard for her. Some days she cries at the kitchen table and doesn't say why. I don't ask. I just sit with her. This isn't a story about perfect forgiveness. It's not a story about a mother who became everything she should have been. She still struggles. She still has moments where the old selfishness surfaces, where she talks about Frank like he was a victim of circumstance instead of a user. But she's trying, and that's more than she was doing before. Here's what I know now that I didn't know on Thanksgiving. Some people choose wrong because they're afraid of being alone. My mother was terrified. Frank and his kids made her feel needed, even though they were the ones taking. I made her feel needed too, but I also made her feel seen. And being seen is harder than being used. Being seen means facing who you really are. I don't know if my mother will ever fully face herself, but I know that my daughter has a grandmother who picks her up from school. And I know that I have a mother who finally calls just to talk, not just to ask for something. And I know that the yellow walls in our apartment have been replaced by blue ones in a small house with a garden where we grow tomatoes and basil and too many zucchinis. If you've ever been the child who got left behind for a new family, a new spouse, a new life, you already know how this feels. The people who should have chosen you didn't, and you had to become your own home. Drop a comment if you've ever slept on an air mattress in someone else's basement. Hit subscribe if you believe that family isn't about who feeds you at Thanksgiving. It's about who shows up at the hospital at 1 a.m. I'll see you in the next one.